Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, December the 16th, 2025. Yesterday I talked about a couple of shootings that had taken place over the weekend. There was a shooting at Brown University and also at Bondi Beach. I hope this time round I have pronounced Bondi correctly. And I want to return to the Bondi Beach shooting. In particular, there is a suspect, and the suspect's driver's license was widely published on the internet, and this driver's license does have a date of birth on it. And in this video, I want to look at the horoscope of the suspect. And, obviously, something dramatic happened in his life. He was certainly arrested. He may or may not have been involved in this shooting because, innocent until proven guilty and so forth. We mustn't assume guilt. So in this video, I want to look at the horoscope of the suspect. And it is interesting. And I think it does indicate the value of solar arc directions. But before I do that, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching of today, which is Tuesday, December the 16th, 2025. So here is the chart of today, set for noon New York time, Tuesday, December the 16th. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So so here's the chart. By the way, top right, that is a picture of the driving license, which has been sort of all over the internet and ringed in red. I ring that to indicate his birthday, which is on the driver's license. So as far as what's happening today is concerned, well, the moon is still in Scorpio. Moon is in the middle of Scorpio, so the moon moving out of the Via Combusta, and it has been sort of quite a sort of hectic few days, and with the moon having left the Via Combusta, it will eventually make trines to Jupiter and Saturn. In fact, it's starting to make a grand trine. We can see the grand trine in water starting to form. Moon slowly moving towards the trines of Jupiter and Saturn. But really, that is about it. And this grand trine doesn't become exact until tomorrow. So really, there isn't a huge amount of stuff going on today. I mean, we still have some sort of aspects sort of left over from the weekend. I mean, Mars, even though Mars has now moved into Capricorn, it is square Neptune. It's moving further away from the exact square. And, Mars square Neptune, we can say all the usual stuff about it. We must be careful where we apply our energy. And, we must make sure that, we're careful about water and water damage. But I think that the Mars square Neptune is definitely getting a lot weaker. And really, that's probably about it. The Sun is still conjunct the Venus-Mars midpoint. So the Sun has been on the Venus-Mars midpoint for quite a long time. There's the Sun, because Venus, Sun and Mars are three planets that are moving at approximately the same speed. I mean, not exactly the same speed. So you'll see a Sun conjunct Venus-Mars on one day, and then it'll continue to the next day and the next day. So that will be around for quite a long time. Sun is also on the Venus, Neptune and Venus Aries midpoints. So there's the Venus Neptune midpoint. So the Sun is semi-square the Venus Neptune midpoint. It is semi-square the Venus Aries midpoint. So that's perhaps says something about the day. When you think about Mars, Neptune and Aries, you put that together. A lot of people in this world, perhaps with more power than they should have, throwing that power around in a way that they don't fully understand. and maybe we can just see that at work. Particularly at the higher level, maybe at the level of politicians and people who have power, maybe who shouldn't have power. So that might be a theme of the day. Also, if we're talking about the Venus-Mars midpoint, the Sun is starting to move towards a conjunction of Saturn. So you can see that the Sun is at 24:59 Sagittarius, Saturn at 25:29 Pisces. So, over the next day or two, the Sun is going to be exactly square Saturn. And at the moment, the Sun and Saturn are both aspecting the Venus-Mars midpoint. So perhaps you could say that the Venus-Mars midpoint is emphasized. And, if we think about the Venus-Mars midpoint, well, that is about attraction, can be about sexuality, and it might be about people's attitudes to sex and attractiveness, perhaps. But it's Saturn. I mean, Saturn is rather a difficult energy, and so I don't know. That might say something about intimacy and sexuality, and having Saturn there, and also having Sun square Saturn as well. Doesn't sound great, though. This might also be about, again, people trying to get on with each other, nations trying to get on with each other. It's certainly a difficult aspect. Saturn square the Venus-Mars midpoint, and it might be ever so slightly transactional. It's not about people just getting on with each other just for the sake of it, just because they like each other, just because they're attracted to each other. There's a certain tendency to think about the payoff. What does one gain? So that might be something to think about over the course of the day. So that's the picture in New York. So let's reset the chart for Sydney, Australia. So looking at Sydney, Australia, the moon is just obviously earlier in the sign. It's still in early Scorpio. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, moon is still in the Naveed Akram. And so for most of the day, the moon is going to be in the Naveed Akram. And that's probably the main difference between Australia, New Zealand, and the Americas. Things might be just a bit less stable, a bit less predictable. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting everything around the sun, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. So we've still got the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. I think that Saturn-Neptune conjunction is still very much with us. Things continue to feel uncertain, but it is past exactitude. And I know I've talked about it rather a lot, perhaps rather too much. So that's coming to an end. And what else have we got? The Earth. The Earth is moving to a sextile of Chiron. So with Earth sextile Chiron, this might be a time when some of us can just be ourselves. We want to show a side to our personalities which is rather different. We don't want to be a conformist, and it may be quite easy to rock the boat without causing too much stress to ourselves, because it is a sextile. But we do want to stand out, and we want to show ourselves to be different. We have to then ask ourselves, how different do we want to be? So that's the broad picture astrologically. There are no exact aspects today involving major aspects, certainly from a GMT perspective. And if there is anything to talk about, well, the Sun square Saturn is still is creeping up on us. And even though the Sun square Saturn is not exact today, Sun in Sagittarius square Saturn in Pisces, although it's not exact, I think that many of us may now be feeling it, and it is a repressive influence. It's not easy. But on the plus side, Sun square Saturn can be about being able to sort of get things together. So anyway, let me now look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, December the 16th, 2025. Aries. Aries, you might be holding something back. I mean, I think part of it has been, recent aspects. You have had Mars, your ruler, has been sort of square Saturn. It's still square Neptune, and you're still slightly concerned. What would happen if you were to really be yourself, and you were to just tell everyone who you are and what you want. You might be concerned. You might be worried about what the reaction might be, and you might take the view, well, it's better just to wait. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you're not in a strong position. I think you actually are. You're probably in a stronger position than you realize, even if you don't feel it. You have a certain power to you. The moon is moving through Scorpio, and so with the moon in Scorpio, it can be a time where parts of yourself and your unconscious are being activated, which it can allow you to tune into your strengths, though it might not be obvious, and you might be inclined to really keep things to yourself. So many Arians will probably want to keep a relatively low profile because it seems easiest. But that doesn't mean to say that you have to. And so you could say that there's an element of choice here. If you want to, you can express yourself with great power, especially on a verbal level. If something bothers you, you can be open about it, and your words can be very cutting. They can also be quite explosive. You just say something. You say something maybe that other people don't want to hear, and then you see the reaction, you see the results, and the results can indeed be quite powerful. So don't doubt yourself, and maybe other people will make the mistake of doubting you. They might not think you've got what it takes. They might not take into account the way you feel. And certainly, Aries, at the moment, there are a lot of things that you do feel. And we also need to consider the possibility of the concept of desire, things that you want. You might really want them. And that relates to the fact that Mars is now in Capricorn. I mean, I talked about Mars in Capricorn yesterday. Mars is still in Capricorn. The beginning, well, obviously it's still in Capricorn. Mars will be in Capricorn until January the 23rd, I think. And so Mars is, early in Capricorn. Mars is exalted in Capricorn. And Mars in Capricorn, well, it's quite an understated position for Mars. It's not like Mars in Aries, but it is exalted. And this means Aries, that you can get on with it. Whatever it is that you want to achieve, you can really start to achieve it. And the fact that there aren't, very many aspects around at the moment, perhaps that makes it even easier. There won't be any interruptions right now. Okay, I know that there's a Sun square Saturn tomorrow, but I don't think you need to worry about that right now. Maybe you can actually use that Sun square Saturn. The Sun has a certain relationship to you. I mean, the Sun is exalted in Aries after all. And so with the Sun square Saturn, that might be a time where you can just quietly get yourself together and you perhaps don't have to make a fuss. You don't have to get angry or annoyed. You can just keep ploughing on, and you don't have to worry too much about what other people are doing. Yeah, but if you want to get annoyed, if you want to blow your top, you can. And as I've said, the things you say can have a very powerful impact, a very powerful and a very immediate impact as well, if you choose to go down that route. So, overall, Aries, I think it's a powerful day, much more powerful than you realize. You might just regard today, Tuesday, as just not being great. That might be your first impression. But if you actually work with the day's energies, I think that you can actually be pretty successful. Taurus. The moon continues to move through Scorpio. I mean, you could argue that is essentially the main thing to report, because certainly from a Greenwich Mean Time perspective, there aren't any major aspects today. Okay, we've got the sun moving towards a square of Saturn, but you could say that's pretty much it. And then we might say that it is other people that matter. You don't have to do anything yourself, anything off your own bat. You can just quietly get on with it, get on with whatever you want to do in your own quiet way, and you can probably leave the big initiatives to other people. But even then, I'm not convinced that anyone is going to want to do anything particularly major. I mean, perhaps people are just exhausted, and they're just going to want to recuperate from something. And so if other people are recuperating, Taurus, well, where's the pressure? There might not be any pressure, even though there seems to be the potential for pressure. It just never quite gets realized. And so, as far as you're concerned, it's quite possible that you're able to sort of just float free. And what do I mean by floating free? Well, you can float free if there is no real obligation. Instead, you can just soak up the vibes. You don't have to get worked up about anything. I think that is actually quite important today. There are always things to get worked up about, and being a Taurus, you can get annoyed, and you can keep your annoyances to yourself, and it can all build up. But right now, Taurus, I think it's okay to just let go. You let go. You can tune into something which is maybe beyond yourself, which doesn't require much in the way of emotional investment. And by emotional investment, I'm not talking about sort of emotional repression. I'm talking about getting worked up about something, or even getting excited about something. Rather than get excited about things, Taurus, you should just perhaps take things as they are. You don't have to have fixed impressions, and so that might be the best approach. And as far as other people are concerned, well, I've talked about the moon being in Scorpio. I talked about that yesterday as well. Moon in Scorpio, yeah. Certain relationships may require your attention. That's true. But at the same time, the sun is starting to make a square to Saturn. And with the sun making a square to Saturn, it's possible that you feel that you're not really very impressed by other people. So, yeah, you could attempt to socialize. You could, meet up with your friends. You could talk to your friends. You could try to find out what other people are doing. But it'll all seem, rather unsatisfactory. Is it your fault? Is it their fault? Well, I think part of you, Taurus, just wants to just be yourself. And yeah, there are certain things that you want to keep quiet about. And if you want to keep quiet about things, then perhaps the last thing you need is a hectic social life. So, overall, Taurus, I just don't think that it's an especially exciting day. And it's a day when ideally you'll have a certain degree of objectivity and distance and detachment, and just that's probably all there is to be said. Gemini. I've been talking to Aries and Taurus, and I think I've been pretty understated in what I've been saying to those two signs. And now we come on to Gemini, and it's kind of more of the same. Just because I distinguish between the 12 signs, which of course I do. I mean, that's why you're watching this. You want to hear what's happening to Gemini. You don't want to hear what's happening to Taurus. And at the same time, you want some sense of a category. I mean, that's what 12 sign astrology is all about, categorizing things. Yet there are certain sort of universal things going on, which affect all of us, regardless of our signs. And it works also when there's not much going on, because there isn't a great deal going on. Astrologically, things are quiet, and that very much fits in with where you are at the moment. Ideally, Gemini, you will be just making sure that everything is in order, everything is sorted out. You don't want any disruptions. You don't want anything to be in your way, holding you up, and that's probably it. And so ideally, you will have a quiet day where you will take everything quite seriously, but nothing too seriously. You'll just sort of watch things develop, and you'll realize that some things are your domain, and if something is in your domain, then for sure you need to look after it and make sure that it's as good as possible. And if something is a mess, then you can clear it up, and that's as simple as that. And other things, it's not your domain. You don't have to worry about it. You could worry about something if it's not organized properly. You could blame people. You could complain. But if it's not your domain, you're almost certainly wasting your time. Yet, we still have three planets in Sagittarius: Mercury, Venus, and the Sun. So don't forget that you have to pay some attention to what other people are doing, but you shouldn't make it personal. Other people have their lives. At times they influence you, but that influence shouldn't ever reach a critical stage. So really, that's as far as it goes. I mean, I'd like to say more, but I don't want to say something just for the sake of it. So I think that for most Geminis, it should be a fairly uneventful day, but a day when you have certain responsibilities to yourself. And if you execute those responsibilities, then I think things should turn out fine. Cancer. You're able to have today quite a lot of freedom. You can largely do what you want. I don't think that there is going to be a great deal of pressure. And you've got the moon is still in Scorpio. In fact, the moon is moving into the last half of Scorpio. So the first half of Scorpio is more difficult from the last half, all things being equal, because of course the first half of Scorpio is the via combustor, and the last half, well, you're out of the via combustor. So as the moon leaves the via combustor, you may find that things start to calm down. And if things are calming down, if there's sort of less pressure on you, then you're going to be happier, and also you're going to have more freedom. And while the moon moves through Scorpio, it starts to make a grand trine. Now, this grand trine is it's not exact today. It's exact tomorrow, Wednesday, but it's still in operation. Moon in Scorpio, trine Jupiter in Capricorn, trine Saturn in Pisces, and as the day progresses, as the moon gets closer to the trine of Jupiter and Saturn, I think that things will probably become more definite. I've said that you've got a lot of freedom today, and the reason you've got freedom is because there isn't anything going on. Okay, it might mean that there's nothing especially good happening in the outside world, but also nothing especially bad. So you could say, Cancer, that you're creating your own luck, and as the grand trine forms, you'd start to see opportunities. It's nice that the moon is applying to a trine of Jupiter, and that trine to Jupiter is it's a lucky trine, and so you can really decide that there's something you want to get into, and you give it your best shot. And also with moon trine Saturn, you can be disciplined about it as well. And so you don't have to be dramatic with this grand trine, but it allows things very sort of naturally and easily to come together for you over the next day or two. Leo, the Sun is starting to make a square to Saturn. This square between the Sun and Saturn becomes exact tomorrow, I think. And so, with Sun square Saturn, is potentially a difficult aspect. So if you think about the Sun square Saturn, something is potentially blocking you. You're approaching a hurdle. Maybe there's something that you want to do. You really want to get it together. This thing might be of a creative nature, and you really want to enjoy it. You want to be part of it, but you're being blocked. So the question is, what might be blocking you? Is it something about yourself and your psychology, your own fears? I mean, that's how we can see Saturn. We could see Saturn. Saturn is a planet of fear and restriction. Perhaps you're reminded of the past. You're in a position where you could enjoy something, you want to enjoy something, but Sun square Saturn, you're being held up, you're being restricted, you're perhaps feeling stuck. And so that is a way in which Sun square Saturn could work. It could also be another person. I mean, Saturn is ruler of Aquarius. Aquarius is your opposite sign, and so that aspect might be that you want to do things, you want to be free, you want to get something together, but it just seems that another person is being really completely unhelpful. They're holding you up, holding you back. You're having to deal with the reality of another person's psychology and agenda, maybe, as well. So it could be about people having different priorities. So as far as relationships are concerned, then the Sun square Saturn is really asking you to work out what's going on. Do you and another person really see eye to eye? And we're talking about a square here. So William Lilly, when he makes a contrast between squares and oppositions, he says that a square is perfect. I think he says a square is perfect enmity and an opposition is perfect hatred. So we're not dealing with perfect hatred here, but we're talking about someone who for one reason or another, you don't get on with, and you'd prefer not to have to deal with them. Now, Sun square Saturn does not last forever. It could well be that Sun square Saturn relates to someone you normally get on with fine. Maybe you're in a very close relationship with them, but over the next couple of days, friction, might come to the surface, and there could be something emotional going on here. How well do you relate to someone? And issues of attraction and repulsion may come to the fore. Now, the reason for that is because the Sun and Saturn are both on the Venus-Mars midpoint. Let me just show you what I mean. So if I set up a 90-degree dial here, there is the Sun-Saturn square. Remember, a Sun-Saturn square is shown as a conjunction on a 90-degree dial. And so you can see that Sun-Saturn square is on the Venus-Mars midpoint. And so, Venus-Mars is a pairing which is about attraction and repulsion. And so with this Sun-Saturn square, it could just say something about the way you feel about other people, and also perhaps how they feel about you. And you can't get on with everyone, and just because you have a negative response to another person, it doesn't mean it's permanent. Because, as I've just said, Sun square Saturn, it will move on. So, as far as relationships are concerned, I would perhaps suggest that over the next couple of days that you probably avoid getting too close to any one person. Even if you've got on with them very well in the past, Sun square Saturn, might present a few difficulties. But I will be talking more about Sun square Saturn, because it is an important aspect, and it is getting stronger. But don't worry about it too much. It will in the end go away. Virgo, it might be a time where you feel that something needs to be said. Why not? I mean, you can't keep quiet forever. But don't be surprised if you do say something that if you are ignored. I mean, it's not that anyone's being rude. It's going to be difficult to get your message to stick. I mean, you can try hard, you can try your hardest, but it really could be hard. It could be hard work. I mean, you can say what you like within reason. You can perhaps use strong words. At least you might think you're saying strong words, but still, just some people just don't listen. You can't expect people to listen, all the time. And if people aren't listening, maybe you have to ask yourself, well, why is that the case? I mean, this is especially important if you're dealing with someone who knows you well. If someone sort of knows you well, they'll sort of assume you're going to say the same things. I mean, that's not very nice, but people do that. People have scripts when dealing with each other. So you say something, you think you're being very precise and clear, and what is the other person hearing? Well, they're just hearing, well, they've made assumptions about what you're going to say anyway, so they've just pulled up a script and they've just assumed that you've said something that you may not even have said. So there could be a possibility that people at the moment are just half listening. And it's not, we don't even have Mercury retrograde. Although Mercury is in Sagittarius, and maybe that Mercury in Sagittarius and some of the problems of Mercury in Sagittarius could be making themselves felt today, because Mercury is your ruler, and Sagittarius, well, Mercury is in its detriment in Sagittarius. And so what that might mean is that people skim over things. You might skim over things, but other people skim over things as well. So you're perhaps being careful to try to explain yourself, But yeah, you're not being listened to. Half of what you say is being listened to. Maybe the wrong part. Maybe things are getting jumbled up. So, don't assume that you have got your message across. And perhaps you have to say it again and again. And you need to make assumptions. You mustn't make assumptions about how other people are going to respond to your words. And, words can be different. You think, for example, I don't know, American English and British English. When you're trying to communicate, coming from the UK, being in America, I can say things. I think I know. I think I'm being made clear, but sometimes I use the wrong words that don't mean anything into an American, or perhaps words that mean something completely different. It does happen. There can be surprising mix-ups in terms of communication. I mean, I'm just saying that. I mean, and of course you're not me, but just consider that possibility. That you're not being quite as clear as you think you are, and because of that, there may be times, Virgo, when you get annoyed. Today could be quite frustrating, but instead, Virgo, you just need a perspective. This is the way it is. Nothing today is worth taking too seriously, and it's certainly not worth getting annoyed about. And perhaps the great thing about there being not many astrological aspects at the moment is that perhaps you can just do largely whatever you like. So if you do things that don't involve other people, that don't require anyone's permission, that you may just then find that you can do something very useful. And perhaps you can also tune into the fact that Mars is now in Capricorn. I think it's great that Mars is in Capricorn from a Virgo perspective. And with Mars in Capricorn, you can be yourself, and you can do something that is important to you, that you don't have to explain, that you don't have to talk about. Libra, I have so far been, I won't say negative, but I've been sort of pretty downbeat about the signs as I've been going through the signs. And the reason I'm being downbeat is because there isn't a huge amount going on. There aren't so many aspects. I mean, we do have the Sun starting to make a square to Saturn. I mean, that Sun square Saturn is exact tomorrow, and inevitably, that's going to affect everyone, and perhaps it sort of casts a bit of a shadow over the day. And as far as how it might affect you, this Sun square Saturn, it may be difficult, for example, for you to get your message across. Everything is hard work. Things could be somewhat laboured, and so you could get upset about that, feel that you don't have a great deal of power. On the other hand, Libra, if you take a different approach, you can really start to feel a whole lot better, and you can feel good about yourself. And I think the key to today is having a degree of detachment, taking the view that nothing is so serious, and also think about what is positive around you, and positive perhaps in a spiritual sense. What are you in touch with? What would you like to merge into? Now, merging into things, it can be dangerous. I mean, egos do matter. I know that merging into some sort of collective spiritual oneness sounds great, but you've got to think about yourself, and you've got to protect your own boundaries. But still, there is a place for just letting go, and not feeling that anything is important, not desperately important, and perhaps aligning to something which is beyond yourself and beyond the sort of everyday concerns. For example, one everyday concern you might have is money. I mean, Moon is in Scorpio, and there is an argument to say that when the Moon is in Scorpio, from a Libran perspective, that can have an influence on money, and you might feel concerned about money or be ready to be concerned about money. But I don't think you want to get too caught up on financial issues. I think it's unnecessary, because right now, Libra, you do have an awareness of how trivial certain things are, and if you can just move beyond things, that might be enough. And also, don't feel that you are going to be able to get any message across. You might believe that you should say something, that you should maybe tell people how you feel, or you should just maybe be a Libran. Libra is quite a sociable sign, and you might just try to be a typical Libran, and it might all fall flat. And so that's a good reason, Libra, today, for being self-sufficient and not taking anything too seriously. And I think that is very much the way through. Scorpio. The Moon continues to move through your sign, and Moon doesn't do much in Scorpio. Well, starting to move through late Scorpio. So with Moon moving through late Scorpio, maybe this is a time where some complications at least are starting to end. Now, if you're in Australia and New Zealand, well, the Moon is, for most of the day, will still be in the first half of Scorpio. In other words, still in the Via Combusta. But don't worry, it's coming to an end. But anyway, regardless of where you are, Moon in Scorpio, is something you are familiar with, and it's very much about you and how you respond to everything, and maybe you can just take advantage of the general situation. It is a day when, at least on the surface, there's not a great deal going on. No one feels particularly inspired, and that might mean that you have a chance to stand out. If everyone else finds it difficult to stand out, then it may not take much effort on your part to be at the center of things, if that is what you want. And of course, you're now beginning to realize that Mars is in Capricorn, and yet Mars in Capricorn, of course, it's exalted, and it says a lot about you, because Mars is ruler of Scorpio, and it means that you can express yourself very well. And expressing yourself very well at a time when a lot of other people are actually finding it difficult to express themselves. And in fact, I think there's evidence, Scorpio, that you can express yourself, if need be, with great power. You make yourself very clear, and even if there's no build-up, normally, self-expression, you start with a conversation, and then you build things up. Maybe there's some small talk, and then you make your point. But you can go from 0 to 100 miles an hour in 5 seconds, at least in a conversational and a communicative way. So if there's something you want to say, you can really say it, and you can be, something of a thunderbolt, I think. Again, if circumstances require it, it may not be, it may not be the approach that you want. It may not be necessary. But if you want to make an impression, Scorpio, you very much can, and you will, I think, get the balance right. You're not going to go too far, and I think you will be helped by the fact that Mars is now in Capricorn, and Mars is still pretty close to the solstice point. It's just over a degree from the solstice point. That's close enough close enough, Scorpio, for you to have a a real impact. And if you feel that you need to discipline anyone, or remind someone of their mistakes, or air a grievance, then Scorpio, I think you're going to be able to do that really very, very effectively. Sagittarius. If in doubt, Sagittarius, then probably you don't have to do it. It's that kind of day. You shouldn't feel any great pressure. Not really. You can do things at your own pace, in your own way, and I think that you won't feel much in the way of restriction. So whatever it is that you want to do, then I think you can just go ahead and do it. And in the process, it's quite possible that you're just not noticed. I know that Sagittarians very often like to be noticed, but Sagittarians are quite capable of making a great deal of noise. But at the moment, I think that that's not really the case. It's just not that kind of day. I think a lot of people today are rather wrapped up in themselves. They're not particularly interested in doing anything, and that could play to your advantage. If you want to do something, the general attitude might be, well, just go ahead. If that's what you want to do, fair enough. And so there might be a degree of sort of general ambivalence around. Sort of no one particularly seems to care, even though the moon is in Scorpio. I mean, the moon in Scorpio is quite an emotional place for the moon, and so people have their emotions, but perhaps they are keeping them to themselves. So what if you want to make the effort? What if you want to make a real supreme effort to be sociable? Well, you might be somewhat unusual, but I don't think that would be too much of a problem. I think that any efforts on your part to make connections, to be happy, be friendly, to share your ideas, you might make an impression. I mean, it's better for nothing, but I don't think you should be looking for anything too dramatic. And it could be that in some places you're going to be more appreciated than in other places. So I'm not saying that you have to necessarily spend all day on your own. I mean, after all, we have got 3 planets in Sagittarius, Sun, Venus, Mercury in Sagittarius. So Sagittarius, you should have no difficulty projecting yourself, but in a relative way. I mean, a lot of people are finding it difficult to be sociable. I think you maybe perhaps find it less difficult than other people, but even so, you shouldn't expect dramatic things. But I don't think it's going to be a bad day. It's just going to be a day when there's just not a great deal going on. Capricorn. Mars is, of course, in your sign, and maybe that's something that you're still getting used to. I mean, it's only just happened, and Mars is very close to the solstice point. By definition, 0 degrees Capricorn is the solstice point, and so this Mars moving through Capricorn, it's really a favourable change. I mean, I know I've already said this yesterday, but I just want to emphasise the point that this does work in your favour. I know that Mars moving into one sign can be difficult, but when it's in Capricorn, it really is quite empowering. And so Capricorn, I know that you sometimes doubt yourself, but really there is no reason to doubt yourself. And today you have an extra advantage because a lot of other people are they're not on great form. They're certainly not firing on all cylinders, and so in a comparative sense, you probably have more energy and more dynamism than other people. Might not feel like that, but I really do think that that is the case. And additionally, you have some real charm. Yeah, charm, and perhaps also attractiveness. Just something about you that is interesting. And if you want to get people's attention, I think that's something you can do. If everything is feeling a bit lackluster, no one quite knows what to do, people are feeling bored, but then you're around, your personality is around, and yeah, you seem to be just the person that everyone needs. So in some respects, Capricorn, if we do things and look at things in a comparative way, you might say that Capricorn is probably, all things being equal, the most powerful of the 12 signs at the moment. There's absolutely no reason why you can't be at the center of things, why you can't be noticed, and why you can't have a real influence. And you may also be helped by the fact that the Sun is making a square to Saturn. I know that Sun square Saturn it sounds a difficult aspect, but Saturn perhaps represents you, and so Sun square Saturn may be about you being in control. So if you don't like the way things are going, if you feel that anyone is behaving out of order, you can create order, and you can be taken very, very seriously. People will listen to you. And so overall, Capricorn, I'm not saying it's going to be a fun day, but I think it's a day when you can really, really assert yourself. So do make the most of it. Aquarius. There are still things that you need to do, that you want to do, that you can do. And so, Aquarius, I'm of the opinion that it can be a day in which you can really, get yourself together in a quiet way. We shouldn't be looking for drama here. Just deciding what is important to you and just doing it. And don't worry, Aquarius, if there is no feedback, if no one seems to be responding to you. Maybe you might even feel that they're ignoring you. It really doesn't matter. Just get on with it in your own way, and you should be looking at things in your own terms rather than anyone else's terms. And and with that approach, I think that you can be quietly successful. And the question then is, what about other people? I mean, other people in many cases are somewhat withdrawn. They're not necessarily on good form, and there is the potential for disappointment. But there is a possibility that you can have an influence. I think if you want to have an influence on people, you have to very much consider them as individuals. Each individual has a certain set of preferences. There are things they find attractive, there are things they find not so attractive, and Aquarius, it seems you're quite aware of all of this. And I think at the moment you're quite capable of adjusting your approach to fit in with different people's personalities. And it might sound like hard work. I mean, having to worry about other people's psychology is something you don't necessarily want to bother with. But yeah, if you can make the effort, then you can create a precise impression, and this precise impression, will ensure that you certainly have an influence. But as far as close relationships are concerned, I don't know. We do have the Sun square Saturn. I mean, the Sun is square Saturn. I think the aspect is maybe I think it's exact tomorrow, and that's relevant to you, Aquarius, because Saturn is your ruler. The Sun is ruler of Aquarius. Sorry, let me get this right. Saturn is ruler of Aquarius, and the Sun is ruler of Leo, which is of course your opposite sign. So you could then say that if Sun is square Saturn, then that does say something about relationships, and relationships could be under pressure. So you might find that with certain people, it's just difficult to get on with them. It's not to say that you hate them or anything like that. It's just a certain mismatch. And do you want to go through with that mismatch? Rather than have to put up with some passing incompatibility, it might be best, Aquarius, if you actually avoid one-to-one relationships. Even if you know someone really well, if you've got on with them very well in the recent past, maybe things are changing, and that there might just be a couple of days while this Sun square Saturn is exact, where relationships should be de-emphasized, and instead, just think about yourself, and think about your own priorities, and also, don't be looking for drama. Though, having said that, you still have something about you that is quite attractive, and maybe this attractiveness is going to be strongest when you're dealing with people who you don't know so well. If you're dealing with people you know very well, it might be a case of familiarity breeds contempt. Do think carefully about other people and how you deal with them. I think other people are important up to a point, but today should fundamentally be about you, and you quietly getting on with the job. Pisces, there is going to be a grand trine soon. The moon is it's in Scorpio, starting to make trines to Jupiter and Saturn. And okay, this grand trine is not exact until tomorrow, but I think you're starting to feel it, and so things are slowly starting to move. Even though on the surface it seems that everything is stuck. I mean, a lot of other people are stuck today. I don't think that today is particularly great in a general sense. I mean, I don't think it's catastrophic. In some ways, today is easier than yesterday and the day before. The Mars square Neptune is breaking up. That's not such a big influence anymore, and the Sun square Saturn, that's well behind us. The Moon is moving out of the Via Combusta. In other words, the Moon is moving into the last part of Scorpio. So that does make things a lot easier for you, but not just for you, for everyone. And now we've got this grand trine, and this grand trine, different people are going to respond to the grand trine energy in different ways. But you being a Pisces, and you've got Saturn in your sign, you've got Jupiter, your ruler, in Cancer, the Moon starting to make trines to both of them. You just might feel that over the course of the day, things are slowly starting to move more quickly. There's more emotional flow. The flow is increasing slowly, and you're able to sort of understand what's happening, and maybe, Pisces, you're able to sort of tune into something which is ever so slightly otherworldly. That's the Moon in Scorpio. The Moon in Scorpio indicates something that may well be beyond you, but it might also represent things about yourself which you have not taken seriously enough, things you can do well, things that you want to share. And if you want to start sharing who you are, sharing what you can do, then now might be the time to start. You might not get immediate results. A lot of other people are in strange moods. They might sort of be putting down the barricades, but that doesn't mean to say you can't have an influence. I mean, you're a Pisces. You can assert yourself in many different ways. So those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and now I want to look at things from a viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 15, which is modesty. And modesty is, in a way, quite a low-profile hexagram. And, that is fitting, because I think today, astrologically, is fairly low profile. After all the drama and excitement we've had, over the weekend, and the tragedy. And so, maybe, today is a quieter day. And, modesty is, as it sounds, it's not a time for showing off. We're not, trying to insist on other people's attention. We're not looking for praise, but that doesn't mean to say that we do nothing. There are plenty of things that we can be doing, and so we have to be honest about who we are and what we can do. And we shouldn't have sort of flights of fantasy about our capabilities, but at the same time, it's quite possible to be too modest. If we're too modest, then something else is going on. This is about modesty, not repressing our creativity, not being afraid, not being. It's not about fear. It's not about shyness. It's just about being honest about who we are, what we can do, and what we have to do. And we have two lines moving. We have the bottom line moving and the top line moving. And the bottom line represents the beginning of something. So that is the beginning of us understanding what has to be done, having the wisdom and the humility to know what we can do, what our role can be. And we're not going to have any thoughts above our stations. And our planning can also be very good. And then the top line moves, and top line in I Ching can often be unfortunate, but not in this case. I think that in this case, we again we see what we can do, but because it's the top line, we have more awareness. The bottom line is the beginning of a process. The top line is the end of a process. We can see how things are developing. We can see where exactly we should be applying ourselves. And yeah, we have something to do. It's not a time to just ignore our responsibilities. That's not being modest. That in a way is being self-centered. So yeah, we know there are things we can do, but we also know the limits of what we can do. And maybe I think that's the key point about modesty. We don't try to do things which are impossible. We don't go beyond our own sphere of interest and sphere of influence. And so we can focus on what is ours. What is our sphere? I mean, this is what the Legge translation of I Ching says. This: what is our sphere? That's what we should be thinking about. Don't go beyond that. And by being quite modest in our aims, but modest doesn't mean bad. It doesn't mean limited. It just means we're being aware of what we can do and what we can't do. By doing that, not going beyond the situation. We are going to get good results, maybe not spectacular results, certainly not spectacular results, because modesty, two moving lines, it transitions to a second hexagram, and that second hexagram is hexagram number 22, which is grace. I mean, a perfectly pleasant hexagram, grace, but again, rather undramatic. And we are perhaps with grace, we're trying to look good up to a point, but we don't want to be, again, we don't want to be arrogant. We just have to focus on form. Form does matter with grace. It's not quite the substance on its own. We have to make sure that we present ourselves well. And given that the previous hexagram was modesty, the right way of approaching things, the right way of appearing is probably to be modest. So that might mean talking in a modest way, dressing in a modest way. We're not trying to attract attention. And, if we want grace, we have it by being simple and being straightforward and being true to ourselves and true to the day's energies. And, if you've been listening to the astrology of today, there's not much going on. It's all rather understated. And if we can be understated without going too far, we can be too understated. We're not trying to disappear. We're not trying to make no attempt whatsoever. You can be too modest. There is that possibility. And modesty, if it's taken too far, can actually become a kind of an arrogance, strange as that might sound. So we don't want to go too far. We just have to be true to ourselves. And that's the best way of handling today's energies. And if we can do that, I think everything should run quite smoothly. And finally, I want to return to Bondi Beach. Given the fact that we now have a date of birth for one of the suspects. So let's just go back to the horoscope of Bondi Beach, the time the attack happened. I mean, I did look at it yesterday, so I'm not going to spend much time on this chart. I'm kind of asking, I asked myself, what did I miss? And one aspect that we did have over the weekend, which I did talk about it yesterday, but just to emphasize it, is that here's the Bondi Beach shooting. Here it is. So one aspect, but I think was important, was the North Node on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. Now, over the weekend, there was a quincunx between Mars and Uranus. So Mars and Uranus were 150 degrees apart at the time of the attack. And also, this was true for the attack at Brown University in Rhode Island. And I don't know about, there was this film director, I've been just reading the comments, people seem very interested in this film director. I've never heard of him, but then I never go to I go to the cinema about once every 20 years, so I wouldn't know, so I don't know anything about him, but apparently he's a big deal. And so that may also be part of this Mars quincunx Uranus. But the thing about this Mars quincunx Uranus is that the North Node is on the Mars Uranus midpoint, and it's a direct midpoint. You can see it here. There's Mars, there's Uranus, and you can see that North Node is on the midpoint. And so, what is the North Node? North Node is about connections. It's not just about karma. If we take the approach of Eberton and Witter, it is about connection, and we should see it as the North Node is not just the North Node or the South Node. We should just see it as the nodal axis, and it's a clear midpoint. If we look at the 360 degree midpoint, so we would which looks at conjunctions and oppositions, we'll definitely be able to see it. So that was going on over the weekend. But in the Bondi Beach case, it was personalized. And the reason it was personalized is because of the ascendant midheaven midpoint. So I know I talk about midpoints a lot. And I think that, the problem with talking about midpoints is that a lot of people don't have access to software that produces midpoints. I know that there are certain online resources which are free, but from what I've seen, they're not great. I mean, maybe I haven't looked hard enough, but they're not great, and so it can be quite difficult to just find your midpoints, all of your midpoints. And I'm still trying to think about that issue, but there are two midpoints which you should be aware of, that you should always calculate, because you can do it by hand. And I'm thinking that I will be putting up a video on that. I don't know when I'm going to do that and how I'm going to do that. Part of me is thinking that I should have a membership section to the channel, and I don't know, charge something like $10 a month or something, and put up extra videos, and maybe put up an instructional video every week. I mean, that's just what I'm thinking. I don't know what your view on the matter is, but anyway, the two midpoints that you should be thinking about are the Sun Moon midpoint and the Ascendant Midheaven midpoint. Other midpoints are important, but those two you should always know. You should always know where the Ascendant Midheaven midpoint and the Sun Moon midpoint is. The Sun Moon midpoint is fundamental. They're the two lights. And if you've got a planet on the Sun Moon midpoint, that planet is just prominent in your chart and in your whole sort of self-expression. And the Ascendant Midheaven is also important. Of course, you need a reasonably accurate time of birth to know where your Ascendant Midheaven midpoint. But the Ascendant Midheaven midpoint, can be important for events. It is the time and the place. The Ascendant and the Midheaven is very particular. So if you look at the Bondi Beach shooting, we should be thinking, where is the Ascendant Midheaven midpoint? So the Ascendant Midheaven midpoint will be at approximately 28 Aries, I think. Yeah, it's about 28 Aries. So you can see that by eye. You'd expect it to be around 28 Aries. So that means that the North Node is on the Ascendant Midheaven midpoint. So the time and the place of this shooting is linked up with the North Node. And the North Node is linked up with the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So the Mars-Uranus midpoint and the Ascendant Midheaven midpoint are right next to each other. And I can show you the midpoints that I'll show you what I'm thinking. I hope I will. So those are the let me just make this bigger so you can really see what I'm talking about here. Sorry about this. So here is these are where the midpoints lie, and there's the North Node. You see, the North Node is at 28 cardinal, and there is the Ascendant Midheaven midpoint, and there's the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So this is on the 45-degree dial. I mean, maybe when I make a video I can be more clear about what this midpoint sort means. So there's the North Node at 28 degrees 6 cardinal, Mars-Uranus at 28 degrees 53 cardinal, and the Ascendant Midheaven at 2905 cardinal. So the Ascendant Midheaven is the time and the place. So the Ascendant Midheaven at time and the place at Bondi Beach on the evening of the 14th was linked with the Mars-Uranus midpoint and also with the node. So I think that is something we do really need to be aware of. So that's what I wanted to say about the shooting and the timing of the shooting. And now I wanted to look at the horoscope of someone who has been, who I believe is a suspect. And so the suspect one of the suspects is Naveed Akram, and so as I understand it, the two suspects were a father and a son. This father is dead, so the son, 24-year-old man. I don't know where he was born. It said he was. I don't know when he was. I don't know. I mean, I know we have a birth date because we've got his driving license, and I don't know where he was born. He said he's a Pakistani national, so I've just gone for Karachi. I'm not saying he was born in Karachi, by the way. I've gone for some sort of random Pakistani city, and so assuming he was born on August the 12th, 2001, if that really is his date of birth, we've got a chart here. It's a chart that we can look at, and okay, it would be nice to have the ascendant, but we have to take what we have, and you have to remember with this chart that he is a suspect. Now, whatever happened, he had a dramatic day. He was arrested. Regardless of whether or not he committed the crime, so he's certainly at the centre of a drama. And as far as his personality is concerned, well, he has Sun, Mars, trine. He has the Sun in Leo, trine Mars in Sagittarius. So the Sun and the Mars are two sort of masculine, fiery planets. They can be attracted to things that explode. Certainly he was involved in a situation where there were gunshots, and I don't know if there are any explosions, but I think that you get some idea that maybe this person was living out a Sun-Mars trine. And, I know you think about it as being a trine, but trine is a good aspect. But when you've got a trine, it's just things can just be just too easy. Things happen quickly. One moment you're minding your own business, you're just on the periphery. The next moment you're in the center of things. And of course, he's been certainly being accused of this massacre, and so that's kind of fitting with Sun trine Mars. Additionally, he's a Sagittarius. His sun at 19. Sorry, not a Sagittarius. He's a Leo. So he's a Leo with his sun at around 20 degrees Leo, and he's got the Sun square Uranus. Sorry, Sun. I'm all over the place here. Sun opposition Uranus. So Uranus is quite an explosive energy. And it's in fixed signs. It's an opposition. It's an opposition. This opposition between Sun and Uranus is in fixed signs. So that might indicate someone who is very determined. Once they decide to do something, they just go ahead and do it. And perhaps there are going to be explosive results. And the determination is further emphasized by his moon in Taurus. I mean, although we don't know what time he was born, we can certainly say, if he was born on August 12th, 2001, that his moon was in Taurus. And that moon in Taurus could well be part of a T-square. Again, we don't know his time of birth, but moon is perhaps how you respond to things. And in Taurus, it can be pretty stubborn. Once it gets into something, it just keeps going. And additionally, he's got from an outer planet perspective, he's got Uranus opposition. He's got Saturn opposition Pluto. So that Saturn opposition Pluto is quite a dramatic aspect. Saturn Pluto. Something has to give, and if we think about this Saturn. If we think about the Saturn-Pluto aspect, let me just look at the one chart that I did want to have a look at, and that is the chart of 9/11. So he was born in August 2001. So he was born the month before 9/11. So at the time of 9/11, there was a Saturn-Pluto opposition, and I think that the 9/11 very much talks about what Saturn-Pluto is about. Something has to give, and it is certainly about sort of dramatic events. And Saturn-Pluto, it just happens, and it is potentially a very violent aspect. And so he, being born the month before 9/11, he has that Saturn-Pluto opposition, and this Saturn-Pluto opposition is also kind of tied up with Mars. So he's got Mars opposition Saturn. I mean, Mars is not exactly opposition Saturn. Mars is not exactly opposition Saturn, but it is pretty close. And so with Mars opposition Saturn, sorry, the phone's going, I'm ignoring it. So Mars opposition Saturn can be about death and destruction. It can also be quite a frustrating influence. So I think looking at his chart, and given what's happened to him, he is a suspect. But we don't know whether he was responsible or not. Innocent till proven guilty. But there are a lot of violent and quite dramatic things in his horoscope. So that's his broad sort of natal chart, and then there are the transits and directions. So I did look at his transits at the time of the shooting. Whatever happened, he was very much tied in with the events, and the transits, I did look at them, and I don't think I was especially impressed by them. So here they are. I mean, he has the Sun was at 22 degrees Sagittarius. Venus was at 17 Sagittarius. So the Sun and Venus were kind of picking up on his Sun-Mars trine, but I wouldn't have said that it was particularly exact. And so as far as other things, I wasn't impressed by the transits at all. And transits, you have to remember, okay, Venus is conjunct his Mars. I mean, again, not exactly, but okay, there are enough planets there to say that something was kind of triggering his Mars. I mean, that's Sun-Venus conjunction, and that sort of maybe sort of stirred him up. But transits are only one form of forecasting. I mean, they're used a lot in astrology simply because they're easy. Because you just have to look at the positions of the planets at one time and compare it with the horoscope of a person's horoscope or a company's horoscope. Yeah, so they're straightforward. But you can also look at other techniques. And one technique you can look at is solar arc directions. So solar arc directions is when you move everything 1 degree for every year you're born. So Naveed Akram was 24 years old when this event happened. He would have been 24 in August. So here are his solar arc directions, and if we look at the solar arc directions and we just compare them, then I think that we are starting to see some sort of quite interesting things going on. So what we have, for example, is look at Uranus. So his solar arc directed Uranus. So he was born with his Uranus at 23 degrees Aquarius. So if we move his Uranus, approximately 16 degrees, 24 degrees, Uranus moves on, we direct it to 16 degrees Pisces. And so Uranus is approaching, it's approaching his Mars. That's one thing to say. Okay, you might say it's a couple of years to go, but then you have to look at the fact that he's got his Mars, there's his Mars Saturn opposition. So the Mars Saturn midpoint is at around 15 degrees. It's around 15 degrees Pisces. So Uranus was just past his Mars Saturn midpoint, and so that might be linking with the kind of person he is. And you could see it both ways. Having Uranus on your Mars Saturn midpoint could be just getting tied up in a shooting, not necessarily being the culprit. It could be that you're involved with it. Again, I have to think about this innocent till proven guilty. We just don't know. But certainly he was at the center of a major event, and he's seen as a suspect. And then his progressed sun, his solar arc directed sun, which is the same as his secondary progressed sun, is at 13 degrees Virgo. And he has got an exact Saturn-Pluto opposition in his horoscope. So his progressed sun at 13 degrees Virgo, is square his Saturn, and it's square his Pluto. So that is a very straightforward aspect, and you can really just see it. And the thing about this point, 13 degrees Virgo, is, I believe, where the South Node is. So if we look at the transits, going back to the Bondi Beach shooting, at the time of the Bondi Beach shooting, the South Node is at 13 degrees Virgo. So this was a kind of a transit. I just looked at his transits and I kind of missed his transits. So going back to his transits. So there is his Saturn-Pluto opposition. The transiting nodal axis was on his Saturn-Pluto opposition. So that really kind of activated it. So the nodes were saying, well, perhaps this is time for that Saturn-Pluto to manifest. And then the progressed or the directed sun was on 13 degrees Virgo. So I think if you bring those two together, the nodes, the transiting nodes, plus the solar arc directed sun, then I think that you're really seeing something manifest. So this might be a case where you should be perhaps looking at transits and solar arc directions together. So that's all I've got to say about Naveed Akram. I thought I had to mention him because we do have a date of birth for him, so I think we can say something which I would regard as being fairly useful about him and his horoscope, even though we don't have the time of birth. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.